So, hi, Subbu. You're looking dapper today.
Yeah,
Good.
I
Good.
am
I,
looking
I, I like your
dapper.
jacket. I like your jacket. I like your jacket.
Thank you.
Not very fond of the shirt, though. But yes, I do like your jacket.
Yeah, it's green is not exactly my color too, but well,
So, how was your
everybody's doing
weekend?
green. It just started. My weekend is
Ah,
I a whole of yesterday and day before I was trying to, wrap my head around whether there's a geographical change that has happened tectonically. Because last I
okay.
checked, I think North Korea was in Asia and US was in North America.
I,
But I think now
I,
it
I,
just got transposed, right?
I get the sarcasm out here. So, you're obviously
So that's
referring to
the
the Facebook issue, the 48
absolutely.
states, the
Yeah.
48
I
states
mean,
that have filed a
what are
lawsuit.
they thinking? What are they thinking? I mean, this is you're talking about the industry which has changed every 3 years. Okay, you've changed. You're talking about an industry where there's been disruption that has happened, and the disruption has not come from big companies. It's come from garage enterprises. It's come from people who have come out of universities or people dropped out from universities for God's sake, right? I mean, they tried to break up IBM. They tried to break up Microsoft. When will they ever learn? And we are talking about an action that is being initiated by the very agency that approved the damn deal. So I don't understand where is it, where are they going? I mean, why don't we have shareholders of Facebook suing the US government?
Yeah, and that is exactly the point that even I want to make, because I'll be sharing a few slides with all our folks now so that we understand what we are talking about. So the background is that this week we had about 48 states in the in US that have filed lawsuits against this company, Facebook, so that they want to split Facebook. They're saying, okay, fine, we do not want Instagram and WhatsApp along with Facebook. We probably need to separate it. So let's place it in perspective. So you see, first of all, that two lawsuits were filed by the United States federal governments and governments of 48 US states and territories. The US FTC lawsuit has accused Facebook of eliminating competition with these acquisitions. The interesting part is that FTC itself had approved these deals. Uh, for those who want to just to put things in perspective again, Facebook acquired Instagram in 2012 for $1 billion. It acquired WhatsApp for a whopping $19 billion in 2014. And both these deals are being cited as attempts to illegally eliminate the competition. Facebook has called the lawsuits a revisionist history. It says that the FTC has seemingly, I'm quoting, FTC has seemingly no regard for settled law or the consequences to innovation and investment. You're also seeing that globally, both Facebook and Google have a lot of battles that they are being fighting with media outlets. The reason is that the kind of revenue they want a fair revenue sharing agreement with companies, whereas Facebook and Google typically argue that they are third party providers and they are just providing a platform. But Australia has taken the lead and it has finalized plans this week to make Facebook and Google pay its media outlets for news content. Now, this move is the first in the world, and this is aimed ostensibly at protecting independent journalism that has been strongly opposed by these internet giants. So, these were just data points. I think what we have understood is the immensity, how big these companies are in India. Like Facebook alone, as we have seen the numbers, 2 billion globally, 2.5 billion if you add, or to almost like 4 billion if I add WhatsApp numbers, if I add Instagram numbers. What is the impact if you look at, if you say that, okay, if Facebook eventually gets split, what are the ramifications that we're seeing on both companies and users, given that they're so intertwined already?
Before we get into the impact, first of all, let's look at the legality of it all. Now, I'm not sure if the United States government invested in Facebook. I'm not sure if the 48 states, any of the 48 states invested in Facebook. They didn't take the risk. The venture capitalists took the risk. Zuckerberg took the risk. Okay. And a few other guys, took the initial risk. To me, this is a very classic capitalist venture capital led model, right? Also, let's understand that Facebook is public, right? Now, I don't know how the government of any country, especially a democratic capitalist country, can suddenly decide that, oh, you know what, this company is too powerful, so let's break it up. Now, the charge is that they are throttling innovation. And they have given one internal communication, from Facebook, which said that, WhatsApp is, growing. So instead of competing, let's acquire it. And they're saying that that is an example of the fact that these are predatory and that they want to throttle competition. Now, again, my question is, every single entrepreneur in the world would love to kill competition, either by acquiring it or by defeating it in the market. So I don't see how that is so damning indictment of Facebook's predatory intent. Let's assume for a minute that Facebook is a predatory 700-pound gorilla, evil empire. That's settled. But again, if you're living in a democratic country, the seller has a right to refuse to sell. Why did WhatsApp sell? Right? So when the buyer and seller are going through a legal transaction, which has been FTC, right? Why should FTC suddenly now come and wake up and say, no, but you know what? We made a mistake and we should break it up. To me, this is nothing but, a travesty of internationally accepted mercantile rules, right? And I'm not sure, obviously I'm nobody to prejudge, but I'm not sure this is going to stand the scrutiny. And we have enough examples. I mean, the same FTC tried to break up IBM. They tried to break up Microsoft. They spent millions and millions of taxpayer dollars, right?
And Bill Gates made a very interesting statement saying that we would have probably taken the lead had we not been dragged down to the courts each and every time these guys wanted to split us up. He's made an open statement. It's there on the internet.
Yeah, because see, the way I look at it is that I don't think, at least in the United States, from what I thought, that it is not government business to run business. Who is the one that is complaining of monopolistic power? Are the users complaining? I don't think so. Are the advertisers complaining? Yes, they are. But they are complaining because of the amount of buying power that Facebook has. On the other side, I would probably agree with what Australia is doing, right? So charge them, make them pay for the content that they're using. Make Google pay, make Facebook pay. That is a perfectly legitimate commercial decision that can be taken. But to suddenly say that, 2 billion people out of 7.5 billion people in the earth are using Facebook, so they're too powerful, let's break it up. No, you can't do that. I don't think this is tenable at all.
The other sense that I get sometimes is that when they granted the permission, like in 2012, when Facebook acquired Instagram, in 2014, when Facebook acquired WhatsApp, everybody knew what was being brought onto the table.
Absolutely.
So we clearly knew the terms of the deal.
Yeah, now, to wake up and say, just because Facebook and WhatsApp and Insta did a fantastic job of marketing and doing their business, to say that I'm going to penalize you for doing good business is just plain, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to use a very strong word, but I think the mildest word that I can use is being moronic.
Well, so I think at that point in time also, because users have raised a lot of privacy concerns. There are plenty of those kind of lobby groups that have raised privacy concerns, and many of them merit attention. It's clearly because this is an entire data game, and there have been a lot of security breaches also. But I think governments had not stepped in earlier or had not filed in cases earlier. They had raised these questions in the Senate. Yes, Mark Zuckerberg had to answer them in the Senate. And there have been actions taken by the respective state governments. In certain ways, Facebook also has improved its privacy policy. So I think these pulls and pressures and pulls and pushes have to be there. I fully accept that. Only point is, is it now that the governments have suddenly been threatened by Facebook, where, say, on social media, you found Twitter challenging the Trump government and deleting his comments or putting caveats over there? Are these also some sort of triggers saying that, okay, fine, these private entities are becoming as big as governments?
Yeah, I mean, see, the harsh reality is that the government and the people who are, leading the policy making are now figuring out that they are at the mercy of these platforms and they do not have adequate checks and balances. They have not developed them to police these guys, right? Now, I like the way Europe deals with it. Europe continuously watches and levies fines, calls them over, roasts them over coal, and then does something about it. When was the last time an FTC ever levied a penalty on Facebook or WhatsApp or Google? Yeah, they call them for the hearings. They are these very tough looking questions asked by very serious looking men and women. And at the end of the day, everything is over, right? I think the problem that the US is facing today is a problem of inertia. They don't know how to deal with it. And which is where again I go back and I say, I think let them borrow a leaf from Australia. Let them say that, no, you know what, you're going to pay a couple of $1 billion, every month because you're using this content, right? On one side, you have independent publishers who are bleeding, right? There, and it is not, a big, great mystery to know that Google is using that content, Facebook is using that content, right? Now, if they are using the content, they jolly well pay for it, right? And there you can actually bring the monopoly argument there, and you say, listen, you are using it, so you have to pay, right? Now, to say that no, you are using it, you're too big, and therefore I'm going to break you up, is cutting off your nose. I mean, what are you trying to do? The world of business knows that scale is the ultimate determinant for pricing. If you don't have scale, you're not able to do optimal pricing. Okay. So why are we suddenly figuring out that, just because somebody has become big, they ought to be broken up? The only model that these guys have is AT&T model, right? Which happened way back, 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But the problem there was it was very capex intensive, and therefore it was, kind of controlled by the big business, right? This is not capex intensive. I mean, Snapchat has come after that. Snapchat is doing a pretty good deal. TikTok has been there around. Okay, never mind the origin and the geos of TikTok. But it takes an idea and it takes a brave venture capitalist to fund the idea. That's how Facebook happened. That's how WhatsApp happened. So,
and also, I think there's a basic difference between the action being taken against, say, Microsoft and Google versus Facebook, in a sense that when you look at the way Microsoft had and Google, they had started building software and adding software components within, within the browser, monopolizing the browser, embedding the browser in devices and all that kind of stuff. Whereas these are like deals that have been above the board. Like everybody saw these deals coming. Everybody had time to look at it. This was not done, quietly in labs.
So see, if you look at it, Internet Explorer was nowhere in the picture when Netscape Navigator was there.
Exactly.
Right? And within a few years, okay, Explorer became number one. And I don't think too many people, at least who are less than 30, wouldn't even know that there was a product called Netscape Navigator.
Yeah.
Okay. This is an industry which fosters and thrives on innovation. And it is not, I mean, to assume that Facebook's monopoly is going to be there for the next 100 years is foolish. Another few years, somebody else is going to come up with something else, a dramatically different disruptive technology, right? What are you going to do at that point in time? You're going to then take all the broken up pieces of Facebook and join it together? And who's going to pay for the value depletion that is going to happen to the people who have invested in Facebook?
Yeah,
I'm
where's
not talking
Yahoo
about
today?
Zuckerberg.
Where's Yahoo today?
Where is Yahoo today? Where is Yahoo today? I mean, so the industry, the IT industry is replete with such examples. I mean, how many people know that, Novell was one of the companies which literally created networks? Okay. They don't know. I mean, all that they know probably, if at all, is that Eric Schmidt used to be the chairman of Novell and he was the
Absolutely.
chairman of Google. Okay. I mean,
Google.
that's about as much of history that they know, right? So I think to assume that Facebook's monopoly is going to be there for the next 20 years, 100 years, and therefore it's a good time to break it up, is being extremely short-sighted.
So
Sure.
now let's move on to our next topic, which is more about the innovation that's happening in India. So digital payments. Now, when we look at I have some data points that I will share shortly. But the interesting part is the reason why we are talking about it is today we are talking about it in the context of whether COVID has given the digital push. Obviously, because we have had physical distancing. And that has led to a lot of retail merchants saying that, okay, fine, if you have a credit card or a debit card, or you can pay with NFC or whatever mode of payment that you have, we probably prefer an online digital kind of payment. So that obviously is the next step. And I think UPI, the United Payments Interface, has played a very, very important part. So if we look at the global digital payments landscape, such obviously the COVID crisis is the trigger. Uh, if you see globally, the number of electronic payment transactions, they have continued to grow at healthy rates in 2019, just shy of 20% annually, at 10% in terms of value conveyed. You look at the India's digital payments landscape, according to Redseer Consulting, India's digital payment market was worth about 2 trillion rupees term in 2019-20. This is expected to grow threefold to about 7.1 trillion by 2025. Obviously, the primary reasons are government policies around financial inclusion, growing digitization of merchants, plus impact of COVID, which is the physical distancing. And the total mobile payment users, who currently stand at about 162 million, would reach around 800 million during this period. This is a nice McKinsey graph that I saw from that 2020 report. If you look at this, the emerging markets, you look at India in 2010, because it was clearly a cash amount, 100% cash economy. Now that in 2020, it's estimated to go to 89. So still, it is a predominantly cash economy. But hopefully, and if you compare it with the mature markets, you look at in 2010, say you look at Japan, 79 percent in 2010, 54% in this, and then another Finland, Sweden, UK. These are among the top guys. So Korea, if you look at Korea, was 60. The percent of cash used in total transaction by volume was 66% in Korea. This in 2020, it has come to 34%. So yes, if you compare the 89% in India to these market leaders, obviously, I don't think we come even anywhere close to what it is. But even China, if you look at its numbers in comparison, you see in China was 99% and now 41% in 2020 estimate. UPI has played a very important part in boosting India's digital payments landscape. These numbers were just out in this week. So as of November 2020, because there's a lag in the numbers always, there were 200 banks live on UPI. They have registered around 2.2 billion transactions. This is the first time it has crossed the 2 billion mark. 60% of the transactions were made using the interface, using the UPI interface, basically. They have been P2P transactions. And the rest were made to vendors and registered merchants. Now, if you look at the breakup, Google Pay, Phone Pay, and Paytm, they account for about 93% of the transactions. So Google Pay was 45% of the transactions by volume. Phone Pay, 41% of the volume. But if you look at the number, the 41 million, 45% UPI transaction, they amounted to 960 million transactions for Google Pay. Flipkart's was 868 million. But the value of the transaction was 1.75 lakh crore for PhonePe, whereas it was 1.61 lakh crore for Google Pay. So I guess that will explain the ticket size for PhonePe. Paytm, which was a market leader at one point in time, today has 260 million UPI transactions. Amazon Pay, 37 million. So these are like the top 4 and 5, and NCPI's own Beam UPI app. It competes with the other apps. That it has got about 23 million transactions. WhatsApp is the latest one, which is the Facebook guy, and that's about 0.3 million transactions worth 13 crore. These are NCPI numbers. Now, if you look at uh, what UPI is doing, it's basically saying that since Google Pay, PhonePe, and Paytm account for over 93% of its entire transactional volume, they want to counter this market dominance. Again, relating to the same breaking monopolies. So it's ironical that we're coming back to the same point. So NCPA announced in November that no single app will be allowed to account for over 30% of UPI transactions on a rolling basis. How excited are you about this whole movement from this pure cash economy towards digital? Are you really seeing that maturity seeping in, or are you seeing that, okay, fine, after this whole thing breaks out of COVID, just because of the lack of the infrastructure, we might go back forth kind of stuff?
The
Yeah.
key thing that we have to understand is that whenever we talk about India specifically, there is a bottom of the pyramid that you have to factor in mind. The bottom of the pyramid, which is primarily using feature phones, okay, or no phones. So if you knock off the feature phones from the total market that you're looking at, then this 89% will actually fall fairly dramatically. Because this market, this bottom of the pyramid market, essentially rural, poor, below the poverty line, which is roughly about 22% of the population, if I'm not mistaken. If you knock them out, and that's a completely cash economy.
Yeah.
That's a completely cash economy. Okay. So if you remove them from your total population, then you look at the adoption, digital adoption, you will probably be somewhere at about 70, 65, 70%. Okay. Which is reasonably good. So I think that is only going to increase. I see that the people who are paying digitally will continue to pay more and transact more. People who are not doing it today are not doing it for two reasons. One, they do not have the digital interface, whether it's a form of a smartphone, whether it's a form of an internet connection or whatever it is. They don't have the facility, they don't have the interface. The second, they're not doing it because of socioeconomic reasons. As long as you do not have a solution which kind of caters to the low tech in that sense, okay, they are not going to adopt. They're going to be a cash economy. But the rest of the market, okay, is going to rapidly adopt digital payments for the simple reason that it's painless and it's a lot less complex, okay, lot less physically demanding, okay, and there are enough securities in place, okay, to make sure that I don't get defrauded. I mean, you could get defrauded in a shop, you could get defrauded online. I mean, that is really not.
Somebody could steal your cash for that matter.
Yeah, so I'm not really putting too much, right? So I think that is not going to change, and that's going to accelerate. And that 70% if we assume that's at 70%, is probably going to become 50% in the next 12 to 18 months time frame. So that's one reality. So that's a good thing to have.
You made a very valid point on that. One thing which I'd like to insist, because that's something that I'd like to come back to. That the socio-economic factor. So the guy who who's a tomato vendor or the potato vendor who's sitting on the side of the road, And if you're actually kind of, will he really be able to get into a digital transaction with you?
He does. In
Yeah.
the cities, he does.
Yeah,
In the cities,
he
he
does.
does. Yeah,
Yeah,
but in
if he's
the
got a
see in
stall.
the rural
Rural
market, he will not, because his buyer is going to give him cash.
Is it that people won't see an opportunity out there? Some kind of entrepreneur who comes up with a different kind of a device, some different kind of a model. I
So
don't know.
I
I'm
think,
just saying,
I mean,
India
it's
is known
possible.
for that.
It's possible. It's just that the current technology parameters do not allow you to. I mean, they impose a larger amount of memory, right? And the interface is graphical. So therefore, a feature phone may not work. Again, I'm saying may not. There could be disruptive ways of doing it. We are known for
G-
jugaad.
Jio has managed to do some things on this
Yeah, so there could be ways of
with feature
doing it.
phones.
Yeah, there could be an aggregation model that may work in each village or each cluster of agglomeration or whatever it is. So, I mean, that being apart, I think the adoption is going to accelerate in the markets where it has already taken place. The other part that in your slide I found interesting was that, again, so I'm going to be in a situation where I'm going to be, I'm a guy who pays using Google Pay. And one day I'll go to the market and I'll use Google Pay, and I'll be told that, no, you can't use Google Pay. Now you have to use something else. Why? Because the government says so. And why is the government saying so? Because they've crossed the 30%.
Cross the 30% for
I
this.
mean, come on. I mean, why should the government of India bother about the relative market shares of payment, gateways? Okay. It is the business of the vendors to market themselves and the vendors to make sure. Now look at Paytm. Paytm is backed by some of the biggest money bags in the world, right? Alibaba and others, but still they've lost market share, right? So why is it that a Paytm's losing market share is okay, but a Google Pay's gaining market share is not okay? That doesn't seem to be making sense to me. I mean, again, go back to the previous time. There was a point in time when, almost everything used to be done by cash, right? Now, today we are saying that, cash is becoming less important. So will tomorrow government come and tell me that no, 30% of an expenditure has to be in cash? It just beats common sense. Whose monopoly are they trying to protect?
And UPI is a very powerful platform. I think we should make
It's an
the best use
extremely
of
powerful
it.
platform. I mean,
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Why do you want people to go to other platforms? I mean,
and why is it that you are saying that no, you should go to Beam, or I'll force you to go to whatever, Arjun or whatever. I mean,
yeah, whatever.
I mean, why is the government telling me who should I pay through? Who should I pay to? What should I pay for? I mean, really, it is, and which is why, if you put it in perspective, it is not, the Indian government is not alone in that. You've seen now the US government is also there, part of it, right? So I think it is some kind of I would say some kind of a misguided socialistic claptrap that we are following. The problem is that there are not enough people to voice the unpopular point of view, to say, so what? So what if 3 people have 93%? It is because the other people have not been able to market themselves. They have not been able to strike alliances.
Yeah, they have spent money on their marketing campaigns. How do you compensate them for that? And so you're actually disincentivizing the entire
exactly
growth. I mean,
so
you're telling
I
an
think
entrepreneur you don't grow.
You are essentially penalizing good performance.
Absolutely.
And you are rewarding people who have not done well, right? So why should you go on doing that? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know whether this should be aired. But try and install Beam, linked to a bank. So when you go and look in Play Store or anywhere, when you search for Beam, you have this 15 different options, right? Beam Bank of India, Beam PNB, Beam so and so. Now, there was a lot of complaints yesterday, only yesterday, since some of these banks are merged. Beam installation of account holders of those merged banks is actually throwing out a bug. It's not happening. Somebody I know took 3 days to install Beam. Now, why should you force me to go through the pain? And that is something that I just don't get. I mean, who are we trying to protect? That's a question.
And as you rightly pointed out, that if you're consolidating banks, then that entire, I mean, Peter should talk to Paul about all these developments. I think the governments are not talking to each other at any given point in time. So I think that while the apps are being integrated, the backend should be talking to each other. And these are like issues which are going to, probably become the fly in the ointment as far as the digital payment landscape.
See, I think this is a sign of the disappointment of the government for, not seeing Beam being adopted the way it thought it would get adopted. When Beam was launched, it was launched by the Prime Minister, right?
Yeah.
They assumed that Beam is going to storm the market and it's going to become the single interface, and given India's population and all that stuff, they're going to have enormous amount of muscle power. So happens after a few years that Beam has got less than 5% of the market. Okay, so it is a back-end favoritism, by which you say, no, Amazon Pay, you can't have 30%, Paytm, you can't have 30%. So at the end of the day, Amazon will have to come down, everybody. Then who's the gainer? The gainer will be Beam. Right? Now, that is no way to, build robust products.
Yeah, and this is like robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of.
Yeah, and robbing somebody else to pay yourself. See, it is Paul is with you. Okay, Paul is your favorite. Okay, Peter is those bad guys, those evil guys who come from outside.
Yeah. And you have the clout to do.
You have the muzzle, you have the power. So do what you want to do. But and also this 30%. Why 30%? Why not 20%? Yeah. Now Google, WhatsApp, they have launched with the initial 20 million limit, 20 million transactions limit. Okay, I mean, why? On one hand, you're saying 30%, then you're saying 20 million initial limit. Then you're saying that no, if somebody has more, we'll come down on it. The best thing to do is to government to say that we are going to tell every citizen who you're going to pay through, what you're going to pay for, okay, who you're going to pay to, and what you're going to buy. Let's kill the argument, no?
No, I think in all fairness, I think the government has done a good job on the UPI interface. I think probably what it needs to also do is to be mindful about the kind of complexities that it will, or the unnecessarily pain points that it would, or obstacles that it would create with this 30% kind of. And the argument that we have had over the years that the government should stay out of business, basically create platforms and allow businesses to thrive on it. On this note, I think we'll end this show because and look forward to having as exciting topics with you on the next week.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Look forward.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Dear friends, thank you for being part of the show. We'll truly appreciate if you like and subscribe to the channel. We'll be coming up with these weekly episodes every Monday. So we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye for now.